Hi, I'm Clate Mask, and on the Conquer the Chaos podcast, I talk with inspiring business owners about what it takes to build a great business and a great life. That means more money, more time, more control, more impact, more freedom. So keep listening to hear the tough lessons they learned so you don't have to repeat them. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. I am your host, Clate Mask, and today I am so excited because I have an awesome guest. Me! I'm going to do this one solo because I want to kick off season 2 and help you understand how the podcast is going to get a little more focused and our episodes will be a little more in depth on the 6 keys to success for entrepreneurs. So as you know, we've got 3 keys that are personal keys, 3 keys that are business keys, and the whole purpose is to use these keys, practice these keys to create success as an entrepreneur. And remember, we've defined success as balanced growth in your business and personal life so that produces the freedom that you want in terms of money, time, control, impact. So balanced growth in business and personal life. That's why we talk about the personal keys and the business keys. And as we kick off season 2, the episodes are going to dig a little deeper. And here's what I mean. I'm sure you all know and all remember in chapter 2 where I talk about the stages of small business growth. Some of you might remember that. I talk about the 1s and 3s of revenue. This is something I speak about commonly, and people ask me a lot about it. And so what we're going to do in season 2 is, as we dig into how to really create this success in our business and personal life, we're going to look at it from a stage perspective. We're going to dig a little deeper into what happens in each stage, and I'll bring guests onto the podcast. In fact, I'm really excited to have the first guest, Eric Lofholm, will be talking about sales and what needs to happen at the various stages, because take sales, for example. If you are in stage 2 and you're trying to grow the business in the early stage, you need a very different set of skills, advice, guidance, tools in order to get to that stage than, say, when you're at stage 5 or 6, you're trying to get to 10 million in revenue, and going from 3 million to 10 million, that requires a different set of skills, a different set of tools, different people, process. Now, that is the thing that we'll be digging into during this season, because what I've learned over the years is that when entrepreneurs practice the 6 keys and do it understanding where they are in the stages, that's where they start to really see fast progress and moving to the next stage of growth. So I'm going to lay it out for you. By the way, this is in chapter 2, but here's the basic premise. Small businesses don't grow in a straight line up and to the right. We know that. We all know that. If you've been an entrepreneur, you know this is true. You hit plateaus at certain points. And the stages came about because many, many years ago, 15 to 20 years ago, during the first few years of running our business and working with small businesses, my co-founder and I, Scott Martineau, we noticed that our customers were hitting predictable plateaus in their revenue growth, and we could see it. We're like, hey, I wonder if Joe knows that in about 6 months, he's going to run into these problems. And we could start to predict it. It became almost eerie and a little spooky that we'd be like, okay, we know what's going to happen here, because we could see what was happening inside of their business from a process standpoint, from a product standpoint, and from a people standpoint. Now, at the time, this was, 17, 18 years ago when we first started to identify this, we were not really clear as to why there were plateaus. We just knew there were plateaus. We could say, look, this customer in this industry, this was happening, and this customer in this industry, this is happening. And then we took a big step back and we said, wow, these plateaus seem to be happening across industries at very similar points in the progress of the business. And so we started to get really curious about this. We were seeing this across thousands of customers we were working with. We had certainly experienced it in our own business. We knew instinctively that businesses don't grow up and to the right in a smooth fashion, that there's this stair-step process, but we didn't know why. And so when we wrote Conquer the Chaos, the first edition, this was 15 years ago, we took the opportunity to really dig in and do some research and identify what was going on. And through literally hundreds of hours of research, primarily around the U.S. Census Bureau data, but also a bunch of other sources, we started to recognize that these laws of business that cause this slowdown were across industries, they were across small business, and if entrepreneurs were unaware of these forces, then they would fall into the traps and they would plateau. Now, sometimes, by the way, people would hit these plateaus and it was kind of like an exhale. Okay, great. We've been going through this tough growth period and we need a little bit of like recovering from the growth pains. That part's understandable. But what's not necessary is the plateauing that occurs. And sometimes those plateaus will be for prolonged periods of time. Stop and think about it. How many of you have been in a situation or you have friends where you're like, hey, I'm stuck at this revenue spot and, we were growing like crazy and now we've been flat for 2 years and it's really discouraging. It's frustrating. And, if you have not had that experience, congratulations. Either the secret that I'm about to share as to why the plateauing occurs, or you have had a lot of capital to try to, kind of propel you through that very quickly, or you kind of unwittingly figured it out. But most people go through these plateaus. Now, here's the interesting thing. The plateaus, as I said, they happen on the ones and threes of revenue. So 100,000, 300,000 is a new stage, 1 million is a new stage, 3 million, 10 million, 30 million, 100 million, and so on. These stages change at the ones and threes of revenue. Curious, right? When we first started digging in and seeing this in the data, we were like, that's so interesting. And then we were like, you know what? This is pretty common with what we see with our customers. We see there's kind of the early stages and get to about 100,000. Now there's a real job, quit the day job. They're really focusing on the business. And then there's some things that kind of have to get sorted out. Then they get to 300,000 and there tends to be a little bit of a plateauing there. Then 1 million was probably the most common plateau that we saw. We could see this very clearly across our customers. But then at 3 million, we'd see it. Again, at 10 million, we'd see it. 30 million, 100 million. We experienced it. So we understood this. And that ones and threes of revenue is it's a really good way to kind of remember this concept. But if you stop and think about it, it's like, well, yeah, when the business grows by 3x, it is quite a different business. Like there's new things that have to be figured out. There's a lot that's changed. And if it grows by 10x, that's 2 stage changes. Yeah, that is, those are 2 really big leaps. So why do businesses hit these plateaus at the ones and threes of revenue? Now, we didn't figure that one out when we wrote the book the first time. In fact, for about 15 years after writing the book, the first edition, we watched this with our customers. We watched it with our partners. We saw the way our partners served customers. We saw it with prospects and small businesses all across the world that we weren't necessarily serving as customers, but we got a picture of what their business looked like. And what we started to identify was there are some key things that if they don't get adjusted, the plateau occurs. And it can be a prolonged plateau if the entrepreneur doesn't recognize what the drivers are of the plateau. And so quite simply, the drivers are people, process, and product. Now, let me explain that a little bit. By people, what I mean is, particularly as you get to 1 million, if you're at 1 million in revenue and the owner of the business is still trying to kind of lead the whole thing, and there aren't some leadership roles created, then the business is going to plateau. The owner can only take so much responsibility and leadership and managerial effort expended to build the business. And so when the business gets to 6, 8, 10 employees, and those are all reporting to one person, you're going to bottleneck. And that leadership bottleneck is a people problem that causes the business to plateau. So to unleash the bottleneck, you've got to spread out the roles and responsibilities, particularly from a leadership standpoint, and get the strength and the capabilities of those leaders pushing the company forward. And A lot of times the 1 million plateau is the most common and the most obvious because the entrepreneur has a really hard time relinquishing control. And by the way, you don't just turn it over. There's a whole way to do that. If you want to learn all about that, check out Elite Entrepreneurs. That's what they teach. But it's a matter of getting everybody aligned to a vision so that when everybody shares that vision, now the leader can, the owner, the entrepreneur can bring on one or two other leaders who can start to take on responsibility. And all of them are working toward a common shared vision. So that common shared vision is the catalyst that will enable the entrepreneur to get out of the bottleneck, be able to feel some relief from other leaders where everybody's working together and rowing in the same direction. So that's an example of where people are the bottleneck or the constraint that will cause the plateau. By the way, another example is as the business is growing and now you're at 3 million and you've got a customer service leader, let's say, but that customer service leader was with you in the early days and was great in the early days, but as the business has gotten bigger, their skill set is not well suited for the new demands of that leadership role. This is perhaps the most widespread across the stages, whereas the founder problem, you see it very clearly at the 1 million stage. The leadership not growing as the company grows, this is the people problem that causes the plateau. What I say often is that a good leader will help you grow through one stage. Think about that. That leader is going to help you grow 3x. A great leader will help you grow 2 stages, 10x. Stop and think about your business right now. If you hired a sales leader that was going to help you 10x your business right now, you'd say that's a great leader. You want that leader, right? Well, a lot of times what happens is the leader doesn't continuously develop the skill set and the network and the resources and understanding that are necessary in order to move the business to the next stage. And so I say a good leader will grow you 1 stage, a great leader will grow you 2 stages, and it's almost unheard of that a leader can grow you 3 stages plus. Occasionally they can because they're so driven, so committed, so eager to improve and get better every day that they burn midnight oil. They go build their networks. They're learning on their own dime. They're doing all kinds of things to stay up with the growth of the business and be able to continue to lead it in that function. But if you're sitting here and you've got a leader who's not what I just described and they've been with you for 2 stages, it's probably a scenario where you need to thank them, be so appreciative of everything they've helped you accomplish to that point, but help them see that the business now needs a different type of leader, not a better leader, worse leader. It's just a different type of leader. And there's no shame in being a great customer service leader in the stage from 1 million to 10 million. That's fantastic. By the way, side note, wouldn't it be amazing if all of our leaders got really clear on the stages where they're really good and where they love to be? Instead of looking for jobs, they're looking for stages and companies that have a purpose, values, mission that calls to them. That would be great, but that's an episode for another day. So I just gave you an example of how the stages, how companies will get plateaued at a stage based on people. That is the most common, and if you're stuck, you need to look at people first. The next one is process. And in terms of process, a lot of times what's happening is the business has grown and outgrown the processes and the systems that we use to get it to that stage. And so again, you think about it, your phone system that was working for you great at a certain stage, it's not working for you down the road. Or perhaps it's your customer, your CRM or your database, your capability. Maybe it was great for you up until 3 million, but it's not great for you beyond that. There's lots of different ways that you can look at this. But when you have processes and systems that are not keeping up with the growth of the business, this is why sometimes we'll get a prolonged stay or a plateau over a long period of time. Now, it's also the reason why you'll get an initial plateau. You have all this growth, and then you have to get your systems and processes to catch up to that. And once you do that, then the growth picks back up. Very common. But if you don't make those changes to the processes and systems, you get stuck. All right, so that's the process. If you're sitting at a plateau right now and you're frustrated, first look at people, second look at process. The third one is product. Now this one, what I've found over the years is that it doesn't necessarily happen at every stage, but usually at every 2 stages. And so you think about it, when your business has grown 10x, you probably did that on the strength of product and product sets that were priced and packaged in a certain way for a certain audience and a certain ideal customer profile, or ICP as we often call it. But when you've grown 10x, it's time to expand your products. Sometimes it's time to refine your ideal customer profile. Sometimes it's time to move that product and target it toward a slightly larger customer. There's all kinds of different ways that you need to make a product adjustment. But if you've gone 2 stages and you haven't adjusted in a significant way your product offering, your pricing, your packaging, your capabilities, the things that you're offering, then likely that's stagnating your growth. And it's necessary for you to make that product adjustment so you can go to the next stage. Okay, so people, process, product, this is why we get stuck at the stages. And I wanted to spend a little time today in this first episode of season 2 so that we can remember a few key principles about the stages and keep those in mind as I talk with guests this season about how to work through the stages. Now, I'm going to finish with this. I said the most critical of the 3 Ps that causes the stagnation is people. And if I can narrow it down even more, the most critical part of people is you, the business owner. And a lot of times what happens is the business owner is not learning and growing, developing fast enough to stay at that next stage. Now, or to get to that next stage. Now, it's also true that founders have the ability to move through a lot more stages. You might be sitting there going, well, shoot, what about me? I've been through this company for 2 stages. Are we just stuck here and destined to not get past it? No. The great news is, and there's a lot of research and a lot of commentary and a lot out there on social media about founder-led. And simply put, founder-led growth is founder-led because the founders are so passionate about what they're doing that they will burn the midnight oil. They will spend discretionary time. They will invest more money. They will get on podcasts. They will do all the things to learn and grow to get to the next stage because they care so much about this business. They care so much about their customers, so much about the impact that they're trying to create. So the good news is that you as a founder are able to move through many more than 2 stages. And it happens all the time. Whereas it's a rare exception that a hired leader will lead through more than 2 stages. So while that's good news, it also puts a lot of responsibility on you to get better, to push yourself. And the 3 keys to success on the personal side are truly your roadmap on how to do that from a personal standpoint. Now, I don't lay out all the resources that you need from mentors and industry leaders and subject matter expertise in your domain. I don't lay out all of that, of course, but what I do is lay out is a framework between in the personal keys that will enable you to get your mindset right, to get your life vision right, to get your rhythm of execution right so that you are practicing that constantly, and that will propel you to be the leader that you need to be at the next stage. So this is the stage is being set here for season 2. I'm excited to have guests that will come in and we'll talk about the stages and what's needed in marketing or sales or product or some of the various areas of the business, but also what's needed for the entrepreneur to work through the stages. And sometimes I'll isolate a particular stage. Sometimes we'll talk about a few stages across a function, but I want us to ground us in the stages because it really is a way for you to focus, to get really clear, to truly conquer the chaos of building a business. Because you can't look at it. You can't look at the whole picture at once. You got to get clear on little pieces of it, and the stages help you do that. Now, the last thing that the stages do, which is really fun, is they ignite your ambition. A lot of times it's hard to see a vision of where you're going to go in your business. You can kind of only see the next peak. And then when you get to that next peak, you're like, oh man, we can totally go to the next peak. I was just talking to a guy recently that I've worked with for many years. And he said, when we built our business, we grew it to about 50 million in revenue. And when you started working with us on setting our vision and talked about building a company that could be a $50 million, $100 million company, he's like, I went back to my team and they all thought I was crazy because they're looking at all the problems and all the issues in the business. They're like, what's this guy smoking? How does he think we're going to build something like that? And that's the natural human tendency. But interestingly, once they got to about 3 million, some people started to go, maybe we could get to 10 or 20 or even 30 million. And then once they got to 10 million, people started thinking 30, 50, maybe even 100 million. And so each time you get to the next stage, not only do you prove it to any of the naysayers, but you also are proving it to the people who believed inside your organization you could get to a certain point. They start to see you can get beyond that. And that's what I love. That's another thing I love about the stages is it ignites ambition. So the stage is set, no pun intended. I'm excited for us to dig in this new way to really explore the 6 keys to success for entrepreneurs. And we'll do that on the personal side, we'll do it on the business side, and we'll do it with some amazing guests. Thanks for humoring me and allowing me to be the favorite guest today. I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about this particular topic. And there's one last thing I'm going to share with you because I feel like I kind of owe it to the community here to share what I'm doing. So I'm practicing the stages of growth in a particular industry right now. So let me give you the background on this. When we created the stages and we shared it with our partners 15 years ago, we started to have customers, it resonated a ton with customers, and people would go, oh man, this is what I see. And by the way, we took all that feedback and refined it over 15 years and then wrote the second version of the book. But one of the things that happened was we would have partners who would come and say, hey, I'm going to take these stages and I'm going to apply them to my industry, whether that was fitness or real estate or we had one that did it for like med spas. Like I saw our partners that would take this general small business growth framework through the stages and the 1s and 3s of revenue, and they would create a guide, a prescriptive path of what someone in their industry should do in order to grow through the stages. And it was awesome. And it was so fun to see how they could make it really specific because it wasn't a general small business growth map. It was specifically for an industry. And truthfully, I was a little envious because I was like, they could get really clear on here's what needs to happen in sales in order to go from 300,000 to 1 million. And here's what needs to happen in marketing to go from 300,000 to 1 million. And here's what needs to happen in your products. And here's what needs to happen because they were industry specific. And so when we sold Keep and I was thinking about, okay, I want to do consulting. And I've shared this with all of you. And by the way, the consulting is amazing. I consult SaaS companies. And I've been actually, I've had a few companies I've worked with over the years, and I've kind of worked with them without really calling it out on the stages. And so over the past 6 months or so, as I've been working with software companies, it became very natural to take the stages that I just described and say, okay, for software companies, if you are at stage 3 and you want to grow your business, here's what you need to do in sales, marketing, product, customer success, finance and operations, and people, in particular your people operations. So I've had a ton of fun doing that. And about 2 months ago, I decided to not just do it in a one-on-one way, but to actually teach this and share it with the Phoenix software community. There's a nonprofit here that I'm leading. It's an amazing CEO role because there's just 2 of us. so it's awesome. I have lots of freedom and lots of time and capability to be able to pour in what I've learned over the last 2 decades plus on helping small businesses grow and apply it more specifically to the industry of software in the geographic region that I live in and love, which is Phoenix. So that's what I'm doing. It will have a lot of bearing on the Conquer the Chaos podcast because we're going to take this stage-specific approach. And some of the guests that I bring in will be around software, but you will, regardless of the industry you're in, you will get a ton of benefit by thinking in this stage-specific way. All right, so Thanks so much for joining us again for season 2. We've got some exciting stuff, some great guests that I've got lined up. And the first thing that we're going to jump into is sales across the stages, because that's a hot button that we all care about a lot. So until next time, keep growing. And I look forward to seeing what you do as you apply the 6 keys to success in the stages of your business. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening. Subscribe right here on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app to make sure that you don't miss a single episode of the Conquer the Chaos podcast. And hey, if you like this episode, let's get this out to more entrepreneurs. We all know that it is not easy to grow a great business and a great life. And so let's get this message out to others. Make sure that you hit the like button, that you comment, and that you share it with others so that we can help other entrepreneurs build a great business and a great life as they conquer the chaos. Keep going, keep serving, and keep growing.